Hey, what's up? Dave with Brazos Valley Strength. And today I'm hopefully going to be making a quick video breaking down the cue knees before hips to help our sumo deadlift lockouts. But just to start off with, I do think that these videos are pretty productive, just kind of breaking down these cues. I think it fits in with the whole theme of what I'm trying to do with the channel, right? Like take the specific things and help us understand the concepts. So if you have other cues that you maybe have questions about, drop them in the comments below. Maybe they'll come to you in other videos that I make. But I think that these videos are easy enough, quick enough that I can use them kind of as I need the time to make the shorter videos in between the bigger in-depth ones. So whatever cues you got, I think I can include these in future videos. So knees before hips, it's a good cue. I think sometimes a lot of the videos I'll make will be on bad cues, but this one I think works really well, specifically for sumo deadlifts. If you're a conventional puller, this one isn't really gonna work so well. I think the balance is a little bit easier there. Stuff is gonna flow a little bit more naturally towards the top. But for sumo, this is gonna be really, really important. So we wanna look at why. And I think the first thing to do to really understand why this matters is to look at what happens when things really don't go well, when we don't lock the knees out while the bar is passing or as the bar passes the knees. We should be really looking to get those knees locked out. So if we lean back too early in our deadlift and we're trying to leverage against the barbell, rather than be able to stay on top of the bar and just push down through the floor so our knees are very unlocked at this point, very flexed, then it's very, very easy for us to push the bar away from us. And really, again, all of these things go back to center of mass and us being able to maintain a good position to be able to create force down to the floor. And this is a really good example of it, that if we start leaning back too early, we can put ourselves in a bad position to where the bar is now pushed forward. My weight is pulled behind the barbell, and I just don't really have leverage to push down on the floor, and I'm just very off balance. That's a really extreme position that people can get into. That's really not all that common. What's more common though, is as the bar is passing the knees, that people start leaning against the bar a little bit too early. So I think the way that I try to explain this cue or use this cue is not necessarily knees before hips, but it's gonna be knees before shoulders. So I don't really cue hip extension necessarily in the deadlift. It happens, obviously, but most of my cues tend to revolve around the upper back and extension there. And in this case, I'm gonna say knees before shoulders because we wanna lock our knees out before pulling our shoulders back. Obviously that locks out our hips. I may keep saying knees before hips, I think it flows a little bit better, but knees before shoulders is probably a better way to look at this. So the common way that I think we see this show up for a lot of people is the bar right around the knees, maybe just past the knees, and we start rushing the lockout. A lot of times this shows up more for people with a little bit more rounded backs. I'm gonna look at the difference between a little bit more extension and a little bit more rounding, but just for our purposes here, rounding is going to exacerbate all of these issues, but I do think it sort of causes these issues in the first place. So many of the fixes that I'm gonna talk about here are kind of already covered in other videos, just fighting for position off the floor and those kind of things. This will help, but this isn't just going to clean things up just automatically, but this part absolutely matters. So as we're getting past the knees, if I start pulling my shoulders back too early, a lot of times this happens because I'm kind of panicking that I get to the lockout, my back is kind of rounded and I'm feeling like, oh God, I need to finish my lockout. And so we start leaning behind the bar. But the trouble there is what I already said a second ago, that I'm now going to be in a position to where I really don't have my good balance on top of the bar. And almost certainly because the weight of the bar, now our system's center of mass, is more in front of me, our body will tend to round a little bit more, that those shoulders get a little bit softer because we're kind of always biasing towards a position to where our body can maintain that balance. So we just get stuck up top to where my balance is behind the barbell. I no longer have leverage to be able to push down into the floor. So we end up in this really kind of bad looking soft knee, soft shoulder position because I can't really get either one. I don't have the leverage into the floor to get my knees extended. And now I'm behind the bar, my back is rounded, and I don't really have the strength to be able to get that extension done. So the fix here has to be that I need to stay on top of the bar for long enough to get my knees fully extended, fully locked out. And then at that point, I can pull behind the barbell because I no longer have those balance requirements or the need for that vertical force down into the floor. So I do want to stop right here though and make sure to point out that this can for sure be overdone. If I'm saying knees before hips, there's no reason that we need to exaggerate it completely to where the trunk angle is just not changing at all. The trunk angle should naturally be changing, right? Almost all of my deadlift cues revolve around aggressively pulling the head, pulling the upper body to the ceiling, pulling between your arms. We're always going to be fighting for that stuff overall, but in an effort to be able to drive down to the floor. So if you find yourself in a position to where you're locking your knees out, the bar's like around your knees, and now there is space between your body and where the barbell is, just like you lock your knees out really dramatically and the barbell is out in front of you, or you lock the barbell or you lock your knees out really quickly and you have this pretty dramatic angle with your trunk, you should just be fighting for a better position through the whole pull, just fighting more for your upper body. So there's no need to lock out super, super aggressively. But I do think that where we see that, I do it sometimes with some of my lighter reps, and many good deadlifters, we see this pretty snappy knee lockout and then really pull back with shoulder extension. And I think that that's a pretty good way to practice this. That, like I said in my bench press video last week talking about flaring the elbows, that it's not something that we really have access to feel that we need it until we really need it. So with light loads, like I said in the bench press, we kind of got to force it. It's pretty easy to maintain our bar path and everything in a kind of a natural feeling position until it gets heavy. And the same thing is true here with our deadlifts, that it's pretty easy for us to overcome kind of those issues with balance as I'm locking out. But if I don't practice it well, then I get to that like nearly locked out position and my knees are a little bit unlocked and my shoulders are kind of soft and I just can't finish it and I'm dragging across my legs and there's grip issues there as well. So just because you see some of these lifters, me too, being really, really snappy with that knees, shoulders lockout, it's not something that you have to force, but I do think it's good practice. And most of the time, we're probably not gonna see that specific look when it's really, really heavy. But that's kind of what we're going for overall. So for sure, off the floor, having a more extended back will make this significantly easier. So if you are already in a really good position, maintaining good leverage with your upper body, just pulling aggressively vertically, you should feel this happen. That just cueing your upper body, driving hard to the ceiling, it should be pretty natural for you that your knees will lock out kind of as you're passing them, and then you just kind of lean against the bar. Easy, great. But for most people with a little bit more rounding in the upper back, which isn't bad, right? Sometimes that's stronger for people. The trade-off is that our lockout is usually going to be the cost of that. That a little bit more rounding in our upper back can sometimes be exacerbated as the loads get heavier, and then we end up kind of in this like, oh, fighting for our life position up top, and that's where the balance stuff makes a humongous difference, and we just have to be patient enough to fight for that position. What I tell my lifters, even what I fight for, this is exactly where I miss my 400 kilo deadlift. Not because I didn't cue this enough, I don't think, just because it's really heavy. But for most people, it all comes down to upper back extension. And as we're passing the knees, we need to continue to fight hard with our upper body to create space and to reach away from the barbell, stretching as much as we can, and just continue to drive and pull vertically. Even if you're somebody who pulls with a more rounded back position, kind of, more protraction in the arms, and you're sacrificing a little bit of that potential or the ease at lockout for that ease off the floor. It's still this right here, this feeling of fighting for extension is going to make the biggest difference, because it's so easy to get stuck in that position up top just because you're trying to make your lockout short, and then you end up with those really soft shoulders, or you just end up off balance and you're not going to be in a position to be able to finish it at all. So even if you're somebody who is a good flat back extended deadlifter, this is still something that you need to practice. You still need to practice pulling hard away from the bar, because sometimes you may get so used to those lockouts being just natural and easy, really snappy, and then the shoulders naturally come back. It's pretty easy to just get lost in that space right there. Even in training, a lot of times you see it with me that I just get stuck like right with that transition. And that's okay, right? We're training. But this is kind of what I think most people see, or where some of my issues at lockout are, is it's just this stuff. And I need to keep fighting for my position off the floor. That's the main place that I think I can clean this up. And the better that my position is off the floor, the better that my lockout is going to be overall. So that probably leads us to how can we fix it, right? Paused deadlifts are one of the best ways that we can really go after this process and to clean all of these things up. So paused deadlifts, like I said, off the floor is where we're really gonna get this, but just practice and cueing it and forcing it and making as many reps as you can look snappy when they can, and holding your lockouts as much as possible. Because to me, one of the biggest issues here is this is just a balance issue, that we don't have enough exposure necessarily to that position to where at the top, I do have to close my knees hard to show my lockout, and I have to lean against the barbell. And sometimes with heavy weights, that balance is just not as natural as we would like it to be. So every rep, your heavy sets, your working sets, when you finish the reps, just get there and hold it. I hold all my reps even with straps, and it's for this reason. It's not necessarily me like training my lockout or anything, but it's just me getting a better sense, a better organization of where I really want my balance to be. So this can be a really easy tool just in your training. Lock those knees out hard, really fight for extension, and then just hold all your final reps. But another thing that I think has surprisingly helped me a lot is little bar holds. So, I don't know that I want to call these rack pulls. I don't program rack pulls. I think that it's probably a waste of time. I think that, again, a lot of what I've said here is that the position off the floor is going to make the biggest difference at lockout. So I don't know that us really training heavy rack pulls is the solution. But with that being said, with some of my lifters, and myself included, when I've been going after my grip training, I've been doing some heavy holds in the rack. So a few sets of like 5 to 10 second holds with some pretty heavy weights, and taking our normal sumo stance, gripping the bar how we normally would, and then holding the bar. But I think one of the main things that I have seen with this is that all of the issues that I've mentioned here show up in these rack holds when I don't appropriately lock my knees out and then pull my shoulders back. So if I'm anticipating the weight being heavy and I just kind of try to lean back against the bar, I get off balance and I can't hold it and I can't lock out that weight. So I found for sure there that me fighting hard to make sure that my knees cleared, and then that gave me the space to be able to pull my shoulders back, made these heavy holds go a whole lot better. And I'm, holding 600, 700 pounds when I'm doing these, so the balance definitely matters there. So I think that can kill two birds with one stone, that it can really help with grip. It can help with that confidence up top, again, kind of the feeling of dragging across your legs. And it can help with the timing, doing the knees before hip lockout. So if heavy holds and rack pulls start showing up around gyms around the country, I'm sorry. I think that it should just be about knee height, just so you have the space, and please set the bar down gently and don't break these barbells. So anyway, as usual, center of mass is kind of the big thing here. Fighting for good position off the floor is really a big deal, but hopefully that gave people a good understanding of why we do want to lock the knees out before we pull our shoulders back in the sumo deadlift. So if you do have other videos, other cues that you want me to address, leave them in the comments. I'd be happy to do it. I like doing these kind of videos. But if you did like this one, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and we'll see you next time.